Welcome into Falcons Today, mailbag time here. I'm answering questions that were asked during our live show, which airs every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. But Larry67, what do you think about the Falcons trading for DK Metcalf? Heard Seattle may be retooling. There's been some very low-level chatter about a DK Metcalf trade that ultimately I don't think has much ground to stand on at all. I don't think it holds very much water, but sometimes when there's smoke, there's fire. So sure, I'll at least entertain the possibility of it, but I'll caution you right now to say, don't look at this and run with DK Metcalf getting traded. Metcalf last year, 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns, one of the best seasons of his NFL career. And I think the Seahawks find themselves in a weird spot where they don't want to admit that they're not real contenders. But I think deep down they're like, yeah, Geno Smith may have been a little bit of a flash in the pan in 2022, and it's probably not going to work out when it comes to playoff wins under Geno. So maybe Seattle would be interested in a surprise trade and try and recoup some good draft assets and get ready for the future. My guess is if they want to do that, they'll go other ways. They're not going to move on from a young, ascending wide receiver. If they were to trade DK Metcalf, you know what they're going to use that draft pick they get for him? They're going to use it on a wide receiver. And they're going to hope he's as good as DK Metcalf. And sure, that next wide receiver will be a fraction of the cost for DK Metcalf. But to me, I don't think it makes a lot of sense for Seattle. So that's really the first point of attack. From Atlanta's point of view, hell yeah. Who wouldn't want a DK Metcalf trade? Do the Falcons need a slightly bigger Drake London? Probably not. It's not the thing that's missing from this wide receiver room, but they'll just take talent. And I think that would be a big boost for Kirk Cousins and Raheem Morris in year one. But I would not give this a good chance of happening. But it is the NFL. Who thought Michael Penix would get picked 8th overall a month ago? So crazy stuff does happen. But would you trade for DK Metcalf? Give me a yes or give me a no down below in the comment section. Dat one Falcons fan. Xavien Howard / Stephon Gilmore on a 1-year, $8 million deal. Thoughts? Done. Done and done. They maybe want a little bit more than $8 million, but when it gets to May, June, July, money starts to dry up for free agents. So I think Stephon Gilmore is looking more likely to go to either the Cowboys, maybe the Patriots, and a return there in Foxborough. Panthers could be a spot. The Bills, I know it's it's actually just all reunions for him, but those are the teams that I've heard mentioned more than others when it comes to Stephon Gilmore. Xavien Howard, I'm in. I know what Xavien Howard looked like last year. It was very far from that 10 interception season he had a few years ago, but I don't think that there's a downside to adding a veteran corner. Sure, you could stunt the growth of Clark Phillips, a day 3 pick last year out of Utah. But if Clark Phillips looks awesome in training camp, all right, you kind of eat your loss a little bit, and Arthur Blank maybe wasted some money on a veteran corner who doesn't have a large role. But I'd rather bring on a veteran corner in training camp than wait until September, October when you're 2-4 because you were effing around at corner and then you decided, all right, this is not working for us. Carson, next one up on the show. Cornerback, tackle, or wide receiver with our first-round pick next year? Tough one. Obviously, there's a lot of predictions that have to go on here. My suspicion would be cornerback. Because next year you may not have A.J. Terrell. If you don't extend him, he's a free agent after 2024. So even if you do extend him, if you don't get great play out of Clark Phillips, they didn't draft a corner this year, so they kind of need to reset at that position or bring in some youth, if you will. So I would be inclined to say cornerback very tentatively. Now, before we get to the rest of the questions on today's episode, if you want to get yourself an Atlanta Falcons pint glass set, go to chatsports.com/Falcons Pints. I put that link for you all in the comments and description of today's video. My free life tip and hack, and it's not much of a hack, is put these bad boys in the freezer 30 minutes before you're ready to have a cold one, watching a Braves game, watching a Falcons game in the future, and past you will thank future you when you have a cold beer. So get yourself a brand new set of Falcons pint glasses. They're on sale too. Chatsports.com/Falcons pints. They also make for great gifts as well. Boomstick season something. Do you think we could get Travis Hunter in next year's draft? Why are you guys so obsessed with the 2025 draft? Sure. I don't know what to make of I don't know what to make of Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. They're maybe more so Shedeur than Travis. I'm sorry to lump or drag Shedeur into this, but I just feel like my very passive check-ins on Colorado football this offseason has been like a lot of talk. Kind of needs to see that talk get backed up with good play. And both those guys were good last year, but there was a lot of losing that also went on. So is it possible to get Travis Hunter? Yeah, I think it's possible. I think you could make a good argument that Travis Hunter is likely to be a early-ish first-round pick next year. And with Kirk Cousins, hopefully the Falcons are not picking early-ish next year. Carson, you're on the show. Where do you think we'll be selecting next year? What is with them? I think, late teens to early 20s. All right, there's 14 teams that make the playoffs. So what does that mean? The team picking 19th in the draft, I think it is. Yeah, the 19th pick in the draft is the first team to be eliminated from the playoffs. So I'll say the Falcons have the 23rd pick in the draft next year. Take it or leave it. 23rd pick in the draft. Carson, I do appreciate the question, though. Yeah. And that, by the way, is a big reason why they felt the need to go get Michael Penix this year. Because they felt like, hey, we expect to be picking in the 20s from here on out. And when you're picking in the 20s, it's tough to get a quarterback. And that's true. Like, there is a lot of history that points to, if you want a quarterback, like, you don't find them very late in the draft all that often. Sure, you have your outliers like Tom Brady and Brock Purdy, but very few far between you find later. The ironic thing is just that they referenced the Packers model when the Packers got Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love in the 20s. So that's where I was like, yeah, I don't think it's fair to compare it to the Packers when the Packers didn't use the 8th overall pick on a quarterback. They got guys in the 20s, which you said you don't want to do. So we'll have to wait and see, of course. But for now, I don't know, somewhere in the 23 section here. We got a question rolling in from Eric Harrison. We'll throw it on screen for you in just a moment, Eric. Why do you believe we haven't restructured a few of the Caleb, Grady Jarrett, Onyemata, Jessie Bates, Jake Matthews, their contracts? We could get 2 of them and clear $12 to $16 million in cap. Okay, so let's just talk about here. Let's play full screen here. We have some graphical issues, but let's just talk about restructuring contracts because it's complicated, it's messy, and every time you think you have a good understanding of it, you discover that you don't know everything about it. When you restructure a contract, you are taking a player's base salary for that season, say 2024, and you are prorating it over the remaining years of their contract. So if they have 3 years left on their deal, you're taking that base salary, reducing it to the minimum, and then whatever fat you trimmed off, let's say it was $10 million, you're spreading that $10 million over the remaining years of their contract. That is a good thing to do. And by the way, you're also putting a huge amount of money into their signing bonus. And that's important. I'll get to that in a moment. But when you do restructure contracts, you have inflated their future cap hits. So you do not restructure contracts for players you do not see being here for the duration of their contract. So even if a part of you is like, we may want to move on from this guy before their contract is up, if you restructure their contract, you have pushed their cap hits to the end of the line, and then you want to cut that player, and you leave yourself with a ginormous dead cap hit. So that's one reason why teams can sometimes be afraid to restructure contracts. Another reason why is when you restructure a contract, you then put that money, like we said, you prorate it into signing bonuses. You need a rich owner to sign off on that. Because believe it or not, I know they're all billionaires, but there are some owners that when a GM calls them up and says, hey, I want to restructure this guy's contract, which means we need to sign a check today for $15 million. Can you do that for me, please? Some owners will say no. I think you can probably guess to who those owners may be, But there are some poor owners out there that like to cry poor and act like they can't do that. And they're lying. They can't do it. They don't want to do it because they are very content with spending just enough money to be somewhat competitive every few years. Luckily, the Atlanta Falcons have an owner who is willing to spend money. We saw that with Kirk Cousins, right? He spent a lot of money on Jessie Bates last offseason, like back-to-back offseasons of big spending purchases. So why don't the Falcons restructure some of these guys' contracts? Some of them, they may not feel like they are going to be here for the duration of their contract. So that is one factor. They also may feel like we don't need to restructure contracts and kick the cap hit down the road when there's not a guy we want to spend it on right now. So that's another factor. Eric, appreciate your question. Rob, Falcons topic. Okay, we'll say that for later. Is Villa, what are likely next moves? Not hopeful, but actual moves. Okay, actual potential moves for the Falcons. Sorry, our graphics are not working at the moment, so I'm just kind of raw dogging this. But actual likely next moves, if we're thinking about just tiny little roster holes that need to be filled, I think this is more than just hopeful. I do think there is an edge rusher signing coming. I do believe that the Falcons will add a pass rusher between now and the start of the 2024 NFL season. So I know it's also a little bit wishful thinking and hopeful, but I do think that is happening. Another spot, they've already added some veteran pieces at cornerback. I think they like their backup tackles because we saw last year a lot of teams lose their starting tackles, and that's a really important piece to have depth at. It's a cornerstone piece. They brought back Storm Norton. They have Rabel. They didn't draft one, so maybe there's another tackle signing coming in depth. Wide receiver, I think, would be another spot where following the OTAs and minicamp portion, if the coaches get their first look at some of these bottom of the depth chart wideouts and they're like, yeah, this is just not going to cut it, we could see another wide receiver come along. So those would be some positions that I think you could see Atlanta bring some reinforcements to. All right, that will do it for us on our mailbag today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm sorry that at the end we ran into some technical difficulties, but as we all can relate, technology does not always behave when you need it to. But we're going to sign off, and we'll see you all later.